Everybody, and welcome to ITC's Zoom session on UK touring. I realise it seems slightly bizarre to be talking about touring at the moment, but when we put this one out, it was hugely popular. So we've turned it into one of our sort of larger sessions. We've been running members fora for the last few weeks, and they sort of take two forms really. One of them is to sort of have a group of only 16 where people can kind of properly talk to each other and peer learn, and this is one of the larger ones because there were so many of you interested. So what we've done with this is to make it into a sort of mini conference discussion. So we have a panel of speakers for you, which I shall introduce you to in a minute. And then the opportunity for you to ask questions throughout. So did I say who I was? For those of you who don't know, I'm Charlotte Jones. I'm Chief Exec of ITC. I've also got colleagues in the room, Zoe Bateman, our General Manager, who's been letting you in, and Thea Stanton, who's our Communications Manager, who is going to be fielding questions. Now, a couple of little housekeeping things. We'll keep you all on mute if that's okay. I shall kind of chair the conversation, so our speakers are going to give about 5 minutes each. And then what we'd quite like you to do, if that's okay, is to put your questions into the chat section. Can everyone find the chat section on their Zoom? And if you could kind of label them question up front so that we can see that that's a question you'd like to ask. Apologies if we don't get to everybody. There probably won't be a chance to have every question, but Thea's going to, it's quite a tough job, Thea, isn't it? But she's going to try and sort of group them and clump them and kind of make sure that all your issues are raised. Also, if you've got comments as well and want to put that in, label it comment, and then we'll know that you've got something to say. We'll try and come to you to get you to ask your question or make your comment personally. But if we're running out of time, we might start to group them together. We are going to record this session, and we recorded the one we did on Tuesday, Managing Uncertainty. So if anybody wants to access that, are we going to put that on the website, Thea? Is that the plan?
Yes, we are, absolutely. I think we're just going to some editing, and then it should be on the website in the next week or so.
Brilliant. So some of these sessions will end up on the website if you're wanting to share them with people or to revisit them. I think that's, oh yes, because there are upwards of 70 of you. I think we try to keep it so that it's able to be a sort of safe space, but obviously with those kind of numbers we can't guarantee complete Chatham House rules. So just so that you're aware that this will be both recorded and people are sharing it. Right, well, I think without more ado, I will introduce our three speakers. So we have Mark Makin from Makin Projects. We have Jan Ryan. What's your company called? Was UK Arts International?
It still is UK Arts International, absolutely.
Still, so Jan's here from sunny Margate, and we have Chris Lloyd from Red Ladder up in Yorkshire. So I'm going to ask each of them to give us sort of 5 minutes seeding the conversation type presentation. No PowerPoints, no kind of heavy tech, but just listening to them, and then we'll open it up to the rest of you to have that conversation. So Mark, I'm going to start with you. Mark, okay. Would you like to just let us know a little bit about yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the session. Right, I think probably the best thing is just to go what we do. Well, my name is Mark Makin. I co-run a company called Makin Projects with my wife Penny, and we work with a wide group of exciting and cool individuals and companies to make nice things happen. My history is I used to sell t-shirts for bands and comedians, and then merchandise for bands and comedians like Boyzone, etc. Then to manage them, and then travel the world for quite a number of years. Ended up in Worcester of all places, and our doorsteps, Jan Ryan, who's sat in on the panel now, asked her for a coffee. So she went, had a coffee with Jan Ryan. A week later, Jan took a punt and said, we're interviewing for another tour booker. Would you like to come along and be interviewed? I did, having no theatre background at all. Jan took a risk, and I started working for UK Arts International. And I think within 5 months, I was working for Stephen Burkhoff, Knee High, Circus Oz. So I got a phenomenal grounding, some of the best theatre companies from both the UK and around the world, and kind of became a tour booker. So I worked with Jan for a number of years, left UK Arts International, worked for Ace Dance and Music, a dance company in Birmingham. But general manager of a dance company, I am not. I'm not brilliant at funding speak, and I'm not brilliant about remystifying a process to get something done. We're pretty good at going, what do we need to do to make something happen? And then we make it happen. So Ace Dance and Music for a year. And then in 2005, when I was scouting around, what are we going to do? It seemed I was fairly good at tour booking. So my wife and I set up our company. So that's been since 2005. At the start of March, we had a brilliant company we've been working on for years. We do lots of touring, lots of co-producing, festival director, we do a lot of comedy, a real mixed portfolio that all centered around getting groups of people together to have fun. Obviously, that stopped in March. So our business literally went that. So that's where we are at the moment. There's a few new projects potentially coming on, but we're in the same situation as I'm guessing all of you in regards to touring, of postponing dates, cancelling dates, moving things around, and trying to see the lay of the land in regards to how we can react, respond, support both programmers and venues, also the artists we work with closely, but also the wider artist group that we know. So that's kind of Makin Projects. One thing to be aware of, and quite a few of you I think are, is I freelance on an initiative called House Theatre. If you're not aware of House, go to housetheatre.org.uk, purely for the resources section, download everything, use it, bastardize it, plagiarize it, it's there for your use. We are a support initiative set up to support venues and programmers in the southeast of England, and our network is 200 venues. So my work with House continues with a team, a very small team there. But also, if you're not signed up to the House newsletter, do that as well. There's a lot of very, very useful, solid information coming out via House newsletter. So hopefully that you'll find that helpful. If you want to know more about Makin Projects and House Theatre, well, makinprojects.co.uk, it's all on there, what we do and how we do and who we work with. House Theatre I've mentioned. As for thoughts on touring at the moment, I think it's potentially too soon until we get any kind of real government steer on when places where people gather can open, and I'm not just talking about theatre auditoriums. Then we can start adapting to that in regards to performance and to doing the work that we do or adapting the work that we do. There's a lot out there already. A lot of people have said a lot of things, a lot of forums. Personally, we're just sitting tight and waiting to see what the science says and what the general government opinion is, but also listening to the public, listening to audiences. If you've not seen the survey by Indigo that's been published online, then have a read, and they're going to do an updated survey as well in a couple of weeks' time. So definitely have a look at the Indigo survey, because it's very much audience focused in regards to, even if venues did open, will audiences have the confidence to come? Now, this survey was done before we got the more freedom to actually go and play outdoors more. So I think things will change through that. But at the moment, it's just a case of like supporting each other, looking after each other, and sharing information, and carrying on with the generosity of that feel we've always had in the arts anyway, and being more open and more free about it, and then working out where the end point might be and what we might be able to do. And I think a lot of people were thinking theatre needed to change anyway. So I know a lot of people out there are using this opportunity, can I say, painful though it is, to do that, and also look at their business models and work out what they might want to do or should be doing, or to be frank, can still do. So that's kind of where we are at the moment, is just planning as much as we can, biding our time, twiddling our thumbs a little bit, but also trying to keep an eye on what's ahead and realizing it is a long game now, and it's how we work with that and how we support as many people as possible.
Thank you, Mark. Jan, what are your thoughts on the current situation and what the potential is?
Well, hi everyone. I mean, I'm sure that we're all going to be saying pretty much the same as each other. You know, it's stating the obvious to say that we're living in extraordinary times. and particularly challenging times for our industry. And I believe that our survival will be contingent on our ability to adapt to the changed circumstances, assuming that conditions outside our control allow us to do so. And that's what we don't know at the moment. Thinking about this session today, because I was just going to come along and hear what everyone else had to say. You know, I was just interested to see what the lie of the land was. But it made me think about and reflect on touring over the last 30 years. Before setting up UK Arts in 1992, I was head of touring at Birmingham Rep. And then touring was seen as a necessary income generation stream. And, you know, we toured big rep shows like Railway Children, Cider with Rosie to #1 venues for 20+ week tours. We also toured studio shows, and we toured work from companies that we supported, like the Snarling Beasties. And it felt like a time when touring was really flourishing. And I suppose that setting up UK Arts was very much a response to that demand. You know, there was a real hunger for quality, diverse, cutting-edge work. And there was sufficient money in the industry at that point to support it, both from the Arts Council in terms of project grants and in guarantees from the venues themselves. But more recently, I think things have started to get difficult. And I don't know if other people have found this as well. The fees for shows were not increasing with the costs of putting them on. And as money got tighter, venue managers became more cautious as to what their programming would be, and much less adventurous. And then came strategic touring funding. And I mean, I feel quite ambivalent about this, because I think in some respects, it was obviously an amazing scheme that really brought together theatres and companies and other partners into doing some amazing stuff. You know, organisations like Fuel, Black Theatre Live, BAC. But at the same time, I think it made it very difficult for individual productions and individual producers to kind of compete in the same way, because we just weren't able to provide the support, either financial or otherwise, that these organizations that were, these coordinated organizations were able to do. So I think the touring landscape is always shifting. And what we face now is extremely challenging, but maybe, as Mark says, it's an opportunity to rethink how we do things anyway. And for me, I just kind of came up with a load of questions, which I'm sure are going through all our minds. International touring. You know, we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. At the end of this, it's likely that travel is going to be much more expensive. So how viable is international touring going to be in the future? Which venues are going to survive? Will there be spaces to perform in? Will those venues that do survive be able to pay reasonable fees? How much money will ACE get from the government, given that the government is spending so much on emergency funding for us all in this crisis? What will the future of ACE funding look like? How do we deal with social distancing? Will the public, as you say, Mark, want to go into shared spaces and enclosed spaces? How will social distancing affect ticket prices? All these things are really important. How do we monetize digital work? How do we monetize taking work to non-theatre spaces, which, as Lynn Gardner said in a recent article, you know, are likely to be the ones that are going to be opening up first, you know, rural touring schemes. So, I mean, I think there's, and how do we make the work stack up financially? That feels to me like the bottom line. So I think there's anxiety in all areas of the industry, and pressure, of course, to keep the flagships afloat. But the ecology of the industry is so complex that for those iconic organisations to thrive, the industry as a whole has to survive. Now, I'm, like a lot of us, currently working on a couple of possible touring shows. But despite wanting to progress them, at present, there's absolutely nothing I can do until things become clearer. When will venues reopen? Which ones will survive? How will things work financially? There are so many questions, and it's hard to plan for a very, very uncertain future. But we're resilient and we're good at adapting. So these qualities are going to be tested over the coming months and possibly years. It's really, really hard to know. So just lots and lots of questions, really. At the moment, no solutions at all. That's it.
Thank you, Jan. Chris, would you like to give us your thoughts?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Chris Lloyd from Red Ladder Theatre Company. We're based in Leeds. We tour nationally and we straddle small to medium scale plus found spaces. So some of our work can expand and contract to fill the areas we're touring to. We also do a lot of non-traditional venue touring to working men's clubs, community centres and sports clubs. So it was with that in mind, I thought I would talk a bit about that. That network of non-traditional venues has been built up, sorry Jan, through strategic touring funds, I have to say. And what we try and do is, whenever we're creating work, is to try and endeavour to make it fit both to studio spaces and non-traditional spaces, so it's fully self-contained. Now that's not always possible for touring theatre companies, depending on scale, but we tour sound, lights, set, costumes, and with the highest possible production event values. Some of the downside is not all the venues have blackouts, so not all the venues have decent sight lines, so quite often it's always on the flat. So what we try and do when we're directing shows is have that in mind, and also when we're looking at venues, we try and assess in terms of direction, in terms of blocking, people standing up, people sitting down, people lying down. Front rows can see, no one else can. So we try and bear that in mind when we're touring. Production values for us are really important for that kind of work. We are often going into venues that don't host arts activities. So to try and transform the spaces as much as possible is one of our key requirements. To that end, we have we've finished our strategic touring grant now after 3 years, and we have produced a guide for non-traditional touring, which I'll give the link to Theo to put up. Some of it's really obvious, some of it's maybe not quite so obvious. I think it's helpful, and it feels even more important that I do feel these venues are more likely to be, as Jan said, and Lingard, more likely to be accepting work sooner than theatres. It's our intention to build a kind of a risk assessment based around people's fears and worries at the moment. So in terms of if we're looking to go to a non-trad venue, we will look at the spacing. We have the floor plans for all the venues, so we can lay out seats in our virtual minds, we can assess capacities, we can ensure that venues, which are quite often run by absolutely non-theatre bookers and non-arts practitioners, that the space will be appropriate, and also from an audience point of view, that they're safe to come in. We'll look at, testing cast and crew. We'll look at making sure the equipment is up to scratch, but also swabbed down. So if and when we get going, there's an air of surety, I think, that venues can have, that we're relatively clean. We took the advantage just before staff went on furlough leave to update our touring packs. So we have 4 or 5 shows that are re-rehearsable within a week that we could send out, so that there is a possibility that if venues are looking for work at short notice, that we can help fill some gaps. We are looking at a possible model whereby the 4 or 5 shows go on a kind of road trip, so that with limited vehicles, possibly 2 vehicles, we could take 4 or 5 shows on the road to specific regions and perform kind of in rep almost, but touring rep. There are a combination of 1 man, 2 men, and 3 men shows, or 3 people actor shows. So there's a, again, we try not to make it just 1 actor, because that becomes quite repetitive. Some of the things I think we're going to have to think about is that we work quite often at the studio small scale level, which I think a lot of members will also be working at, and it will be, I think, conversation with venues, move studio scale work into mid-scale venues if they're having to reduce audience sizes, and it's some help in making sure those shows look appropriate for that space. I think financially we could make it work on reduced capacity, but I think, because obviously the shows are mainly built to fit in quite small spaces, some help from venues in terms of blocking, in terms of technical support as to how they look. The other element that we are lucky and fortunate to have is a warehouse, which is leased through the scheme whereby you get charitable rate relief when buildings are out of commission and we use them for charitable purposes. So again, if there's any members who would like to talk to me at all about how that system works, basically a business who's got a warehouse or space, it could be office space, it could be rehearsal space, that is currently redundant, can apply to lease it to a charity, which automatically gets charitable rate relief, saving the business 80%. They then make a donation to the charity and also transfer the 20% mandatory rates. So everyone wins, and it's a great facility for storing sets. We've got a lot of space for set storage. Our warehouse is a bit dusty and a bit dank and a bit cold, so not brilliant for rehearsal, but again, that is feasible. So I think when we're looking at ways to come out of this blinking sunlight, there are a number of ways that I think venues can help. They have space, and maybe we can use that for rehearsing in, but there is this option of business space that I'm more than happy to chat to people about. And underlying all of this is our support for artists that we work with and for, checking in with people, looking for opportunities to link people up, and hopefully helping people get through this.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. Some interesting reflections there, and yes, I understandably, given the time that we're in and what's going on, yes, it does raise more questions than solutions. One of the things that I've been thinking about, though, around our sector is that I think it's fairly obvious that it will be our sector that starts to make work first, that will actually be the one pioneering, if you like, in these difficult times. And one of the things that I'm really concerned to make sure happens, and have been having conversations with the Arts Council about, and various other kind of decision makers, if you like, in the sector, is to make sure that that is recognised, and that the risk that our members are going to be taking is enabled and is given a helpful context. And one of the things I've been hearing quite a lot of at the moment is a feeling that maybe the sector can't entirely trust all the venues that they're going to be dealing with. So I'd be very interested in exploring, particularly actually from Mark, any thoughts you might have on how to get venues to engage with risk-taking producers and to enable them to make their work in a kind of in a more confident way, if you like. I don't know if that's something that you might be able to address, Mark.
Yeah, totally. I think at the moment, a lot of venues are still in that situation of going, can they actually open in the autumn? If they do in the autumn, what are the audiences or income going to look like? Because you've got to understand, quite a few venues are actually not losing money by not opening at the moment. So a lot of venues are actually in stasis at the moment. And I'm having various conversations through the house network. We have an afternoon tea where we have at least 45 to 50 programmers kind of coming for tea on a Thursday afternoon. And one of the things quite a lot of venues wanted to wait for is to see what happens with audiences and what happens over the summer. It feels like there's some kind of hiatus here now with people. Would they really want to go sit in a venue this time of year anyway? As opposed to now they want to go see families, go for a barbecue, or do that side of life. I think for companies to get in contact with programmers, I think a lot of programmers are actually on furlough at the moment. So there's no communication there at all. They don't know about their uncertain future. And a lot of programmers are saying that, well, quite a few venue managers have been levied with the fact of, why don't you open your bars and cafes? You can still do takeaway services. And a couple of venues have got back saying, well, I need to at least employ 3 people. Will I make enough money to bring in an income for those 3 people, as opposed to taking them off furlough at the moment where I know they're employed, they have a job, they have a future. So that's literally the balance we are in at the moment in regards to the nuts and bolts and entrepreneurial aspect of money making within venues that's away from theatre itself. So you can contact programmers if they're there, but I'd say have an idea of what you might want out of a relationship, but also really have an understanding of what programmers and venues might be going through as well. Because I always find if I'm in a room with lots of artists at any kind of conference or event or gathering, and after a while, I'll have the need to pipe up and go, okay, you've all been talking about your own work and you've all been talking about yourselves, but nobody's mentioned audiences and nobody's mentioned venue programmers. And a lot of people still, sadly, feel it's a kind of an us and them. It's the artist and the venue perspective. But programmers are just like we are. We have regular events at house where, say, pitch-up events, for example, so companies can come pitch an idea, but we get our programmers to come and pitch what they have as well and see if there's some kind of match between them. And then everyone relax and go, you are just like us. You're trying to make things work on limited budgets, limited funding, limited council money out there, especially because of this. So I think look at your local venues or the venues you may have been to before, or your aspirations of venues and art centres you might want to go to. Think about what you have. Is there a potential need? Then start that conversation. But again, have some understanding of what it's like on their side, if you do feel it's an us and them kind of thing, and also help educate what it's like on your side as well, and try to find a match.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think the puzzle that a lot of people are having at the moment is how to open those communications. And as you rightly said, a lot of the key people are on furlough. But I'm very conscious of our sector sort of, having quite a lot of ideas at the moment, actually, and the need for there to be some sort of receptive ear for that within the venue sector. But I completely agree that it should not be a them and us relationship, that we have to find a way of collaborating and cooperating. I think it's very interesting what you said there as well about it. An awful lot of organisations it's they're not losing money by being shut, and that's another issue really. I think our sector are, oddly enough, I think there's less furloughing within our sector than there is within the sort of larger organisations. Quite a lot more of our members are still active, which I think is interesting.